we've got Rosemary Kayess, who is, I'm just going to give the little bio. So Rosemary is a human rights lawyer. Rosemary Kayess is an internationally recognised and well-respected human rights lawyer in the areas of disability. She is the chairperson of the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Rosemary teaches international human rights law at the Faculty of Law, University of New South Wales. Rosemary was a designated expert on the Australian government delegation to the United Nations negotiations for the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and facilitated the drafting of Article 24 on the right to education. In 2019, Rosemary was awarded the Australian Human Rights Medal. Rosemary will be getting onto the stage, but firstly, also very exciting news that came out last week is Rosemary is now the new appointed Disability Discrimination Commissioner and will be starting in January for a 5-year term. We are so excited to see a woman with disability in this role who has a significant lived experience but also has been part of not only local, national but international work on promoting the rights of people with disability. So Rosemary will be online. I will be asking Rosemary questions. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to get here due to circumstances. So without further ado, I'd love everybody to put their hands together for the fabulous Rosemary. Thank you. Hey Rosemary.
Hi Mel, how are you?
Oh, I'm absolutely brilliant. How are you?
Not too bad, though, since we last spoke. Another one of my support people have gone down with COVID.
Yeah, so unfortunately, Rosemary's support people are all quite unwell. That's why she was unable to get here today. And if people don't know Rosemary, she like me, is in a wheelchair and does require support. So, but you still look just as fabulous on the big screen. And everyone's excited to hear from you today. So thank you for coming.
Yeah, well, just a word for people. I'm a aging middle-aged woman who uses a wheelchair with grey and blonde hair, and I have, if you believe my brother's spooky blue eyes.
Excellent. So Rosemary, I'm going to ask you the first question. So we gave you a bit of a brief bio about you. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that makes you, other than what you just said?
It's funny, that's probably the most defining thing about me, that is how I ended up in the law and human rights, is probably the fact that I'm the only girl in a family of 4 kids. So I had 3 older brothers. So everybody thinks that when I got had my accident and became disabled, that drives me about a sense of justice. But no, it was being the little girl amongst three big brothers. That it was gender inequality that was my first beef.
So you had a first beef and then you continued with another.
Yeah.
So Rosemary, as a woman with disability, what does social and sexual safety mean to you? And has this changed from when you were without a disability to acquiring one?
Yeah, I suppose it has changed, but what it means for me is being comfortable in the spaces that I'm in, feeling as if I can just be me and be relaxed and do what I do. I don't have to be any particular person. I don't have to worry about the space that I'm in or the people that I'm with. I suppose before my accident, being quite a young adolescent, being a young woman, safety was more so about sexual safety. And so that sense that you could not be safe in certain places is something that has changed a little bit since my disability. I suppose I've never really sensed the same lack of safety in a sexual way since my accident that I did prior to my accident. And I think that says a lot about the nature of our society and the asexualising of people with disability. And the way many women with disability and many men with disability are not seen as sexual beings.
Mm.
But safety now for me is about, well, it's today, having the comfort and the knowledge that I'll be able to get into bed tonight and be able to get up again tomorrow morning.
Mm.
And the heightened individualised way that systems work now can put a lot of pressure on people to be able to ensure that they have that safety.
Yeah, absolutely. And just adding to that, like Rosemary, so you work as a human rights lawyer. You're the first person to be a chairperson as well, which is pretty amazing. And as we were having a conversation yesterday, you've been on the board for the Australian Centre for Disability Law, which is a disability discrimination legal centre in New South Wales. And you've been on the board for how long? 27, 28 years. So just a little time. So been and Rosemary was telling me yesterday that when she first started on the board, like they rotated taking the minutes, etc. And because she's unable to do that, she was placed into the chair role and didn't leave the chair role. So it's been the chair for a very long time. Yeah.
Yes, a very long time.
Yeah,
I did offer to be chair since everybody else was rotating the minutes, but yeah, I sort of put myself in that one.
And so you've been very much involved in the United Nations Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disability. And what do you think people with disability and all their associates, so their friends, their families, their carers, their colleagues, etc., what can they do to know how they can best learn what their rights are as a person that has disability?
There's lots of resources out there. There's lots of resources online. The strong thing about the convention in Australia is that organisations of people with disability operate within a human rights context. They use the language of human rights. So there's some really strong advocacy organisations that will be able to support people to get lots of information. We've got lots of information out in various formats, and so it's very accessible. So I think I would head to an advocacy organisation if you're looking for information about rights. But it's also having conversations with people about the ordinariness of disability, or what we call disability. I mean, at its most fundamental, it's about impairment. And human rights is just about recognising that impairment is just one part of the human condition, that the human condition is an infinitely varied condition, and nobody is typical. There is an array of, difference amongst us. And if we can accept that, then we can stop finding deficits in people that have certain disabilities, certain impairments, and labelling them as disabled, and using that as the basis for denying their exercise of human rights.
So when you're mentioning, Rosemary, that often we will label people that have disability, or we already make those assumptions about people with disability. So what is something that you think people could do to stop that from happening, or try to change their ways, etc.?
Well, it's about recognising ableism for what it is, and that there is an inherent value system within our societies that values a certain body type over others. And that has significant impact on the way we design things, the way we create systems within our societies. So I suppose it's about, if you're going to do something to recognise it, it's about acknowledging that it happens. In your workplace, in your school, in your community, it's recognising that ableism is a factor in the way people think, and being able to call things up and say, well, no, we're not considering what the issues are for other people.
So Rosemary, just like some people might know what ableism is, are you able to just give a bit of an example of what that actually looks like?
Yeah, well, as I said, ableism is a value system where certain body and mind types are valued over others, and so you see ableism in thought processes within society, say town planning, that doesn't factor in for wheelchair travel, doesn't factor in public transport systems for people who have low vision, so there's no contrast or tactile signage. So it's those decisions that reflect an ableist mode of thinking.
Yeah. And Rosemary, in light of the recommendations that have come out for the recent Disability Royal Commission, what are your thoughts? Or, I know we don't have long, but in a really, really quick snapshot, what are your thoughts?
Look, it's good. It was an important process to have. I think it truly highlighted the extensive abuse, neglect and exploitation that people with disability experience. Whether I think all of the recommendations address and get to the heart of some of the really, really core issues, I think there's some glaring holes in the report. I think mental health, continuing to focus that as a health issue and not recognise the overlap is problematic. I think the fact that there wasn't a dedicated chapter on women with disability is problematic, and that mostly it's dealt with in a domestic violence framework. As a human rights lawyer, my preference would be for a Human Rights Act rather than a separate Disability Rights Act. I think there's importance in recognising intersectionality, and that our anti-discrimination laws, as they stand as siloed pieces of legislation, are problematic. So I am bitterly disappointed on where it went with segregation. I'm very sorry that the commissioners couldn't see segregation for what it is, that it's, fundamentally a human rights violation.
Absolutely. And so as the new appointed Disability Discrimination Commissioner, starting, what is it, 29th of January?
29th of January, yes.
I'll be calling you at 9 a.m. as your first point of call. So I get the feeling Rosemary's going to block my number after this meeting and stuff. So how do you think people in this room could start thinking about or contribute to walking the path, pardon the pun, with you and all others that have disabilities? So what are some of the things that you're really keen to focus on over the next 5 years? And what are some of the things that you're wanting people in the community, in the sector, like funding bodies, people with disability, their associates, just everybody, to start considering? And because we know you're going to change the world. We've got that settled. So in 5 years' time, the world's going to be perfect.
Not too much pressure.
Yeah, I've known Rosemary for many years. So what are some of the things that we could actually start thinking about and doing and supporting you as well, with your role, if you're going to be a voice for people with disability, what are some of the things that you really want to see services and people that have disability doing to help with the process of what you've got to do?
First and foremost, I want my term to be about the human rights of people with disabilities. I really want the conversation to be about that. I can have all the wish lists in the world. I've got to actually start the job yet. And there is a very large reform agenda. We've just talked about that. There's 12 volumes of the Disability Royal Commission. There's the NDIS review report, which is due tomorrow, I think. That will be significant. There is currently a parliamentary inquiry into Australia's human rights protection. So there's a big reform agenda that I need to come to grips with before I can say, what I'm going to start doing on day one. But, there are indicators. Segregation as a discussion in our community obviously needs to be dealt with, because if a Royal Commission can't come to agreement on that, then that demonstrates that we need to work harder for people to understand what inclusive education is about. I think there's other areas that, and the work that you're doing with Safer Girls, Safer Women is incredibly important. Violence and abuse has been put on the agenda from the Royal Commission, and so, there's projects like yours that will be critical leading into any reform process. So I'm sorry I can't give you a definitive answer, but there's so much we could choose from, is what I'm trying to say. And it will be the Royal Commission, it will be the NDIS review, and probably the Human Rights Act will all overlay over each other, and so priorities will emerge once we get a better understanding of the NDIS review and where the Parliamentary Joint Committee comes down on a Human Rights Act.
And I guess, Rosemary, not everyone's going to have great knowledge around the NDIS review or the Royal Commission, etc., for multiple reasons. But I feel like one of the things that we could do is just start including people with disability in discussions, and also just having people with disabilities' voices heard in all parts of things that have to do with that person with a disability as well, because that's when change will start happening as well.
Yeah, it's the respect for individuals with disability, involving them, closely consulting, having them actively involved,
that's the standard that the convention sets on states. That's the standard they need to meet. So advocacy organisations such as DPOA, Disabled People's Organisations Australia, and that group of organisations, ACTO, representative organisations, they play a really important role. And I mean, even my situation today, advocacy is so incredibly important. Now we've got a highly individualised, marketised framework. And so, that's why I say the NDIS review will be so incredibly important. And so people's voices have to be heard. Be active within your advocacy group. Be active within your community. It's how we change things. If people are seen and heard in their community, people expect to see and hear more people with impairment in their community. I mean, that's why I've always believed inclusive education is so important. Kids without disability grow up at school with kids with disability. They expect inclusion. They expect inclusion in their higher school years. They expect it at their university. They expect it in their workplace and in their community and in their sporting groups. So it's that engagement with the community that's so important. But that community has to be a safe space. It has to be a welcoming space, and you have to belong.
Yep, absolutely.
The Australian Disability Strategy will be such an incredibly important tool for that, to ensure that we can build inclusive communities. And I mean, that is the balance against the NDIS, because the Australian Disability Strategy hasn't been doing the heavy lifting. The NDIS has had greater financial input placed upon it, because if mainstream Australia is not accessible, then people need specialist disability supports to provide that access for them. And so the whole fundamental premise of the NDIS gets put under pressure, because you've got no release valve with a more accessible community.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Rosemary, for popping online and chatting with everyone. And again, like me personally, but also I'm going to speak for everybody and make the assumption, which we don't like making assumptions, but everyone's so excited that you are going to be the Disability Discrimination Commissioner, and you should be absolutely proud of doing that, and and just being that voice for so many of us that have disability, making those changes, etc. It's so important, the work that you've done for many, many, many years. And I think that we're all very lucky that we've had you fighting our battles quite often. That's literally what it's been. But keep the good work up. And yeah, do you have any final words of wisdom before?
No, I watched the Barbie movie on the way home somewhere the other.
Never thought that was going to come up. All right.
And apparently, it is possible to change worlds. So, I actually think that we're in a good place at the moment. That there is an agenda that can have real impact. So be positive. I've always been an optimist. So I think there's some great opportunities if we can generate some will. I think things can progress.
If Barbie can do it, can accept people with disability, we all can. Maybe that should be your tagline.
Well, Barbie changed the world, so can I.
Yep.